This is Edith Neumeyer, and I am the author of the book, The Mystery of Adam. Today, I want to go back and talk a little bit about inspiration of the Bible. I came across this really great Bible scholar. His name is Dr. Michael Heiser, and he wrote a book called The Unseen Realm, and in which he is trying to help people understand or help people to realize how important it is to understand the writers of the Bible and their knowledge, their background, their educational kind of information, and their kind of worldview. If we do not know that, then it's very hard to understand what the writer meant to say in many, many passages. And so it is with Paul. We talked about First Timothy, I believe, 2, around 9, 11, 15. And I discussed that it's really unusual why Paul makes a connection between the age, for instance, of Adam, the first man, and him having authority over Eve. We don't understand his reasoning, but I believe if we would know about ancient writings, then we would understand it a lot more. Because a lot of Paul's writing is not necessarily inspired by God, but it is affected by his culture, by his beliefs, um, cultural beliefs, religious beliefs. And so I came across this one topic that Dr. Michael Heiser was talking about, the head covering in 1 Corinthians 11, 1 through 16. And it just really shows so clearly how much Paul must have been affected or influenced by the thinking, the Greek thinking, the Greek thinkers or philosophers, Aristotle, Socrates, and Plato. And he points out very clearly, it's not his research, but he is quoting from somebody else's research, from some very scholarly research. And he is showing clearly that Paul, when he wrote about the head covering, that he was writing and he is saying, Paul is saying, that he is building his arguments on nature. Does not nature teach you, he says? And I'm thinking, wait a minute, nature doesn't teach me anything like that. And so we come to that conclusion that Paul must have known something that we don't know anymore, some information. So it's very interesting to listen to this Michael Heiser, and he speaks a lot on this YouTube channel called General Han Solo, and I will put the information on the bottom. And one of the sessions again was on head covering, and you can read it. I don't have the time for him to read this whole 1 Corinthians 11, 1 through 16. You may want to stop the video and then just read that first on your own and then continue. So anyways, here is Heiser, and I'm going to start kind of in the middle, but maybe if you want to listen to the whole thing, you can do that. So anyways, here's when it really gets kind of deep into it.
He says, ancient medical conceptions confirm this association. Parabolaion is the lemma as far as a meaning of testicle. And again, this is the word used in 1 Corinthians 11:15 for the covering. So he writes, ancient medical conceptions confirm this association. Hippocratic authors hold, now catch this, they argue that hair is hollow and grows primarily from either male or female reproductive fluid or semen flowing into it and congealing. That's a quote from Hippocrates. Since hollow body parts create a vacuum and attract fluid, hair attracts semen. Appropriately, the term Kame refers not only to hair in Greek, but also to the arms or suckers of the cuttlefish. So his point is that hair, these little extensions that we again know as hair, were again viewed as things that were sort of active and living, and they attracted fluid. Martin continues, hair grows most prolifically from the head because the brain is the place where the semen is produced or at least stored. Another quote from Hippocrates. Martin continues, hair grows only on the head of prepubescent humans because semen is stored in the brain and the channels of the body have not yet become large enough for reproductive fluid to travel throughout the body. Again, that's another quote from Hippocrates. Back to Martin. At puberty, secondary hair growth in the pubic area marks the movement of reproductive fluid from the brain to the rest of the body. That's our fourth quote from Hippocrates. Martin again. Women have less body hair, not only because they have less semen, but also because their colder bodies do not froth the semen throughout their bodies, but reduce semen evaporation at the ends of their hair. That's our fifth quote from Hippocrates. So Martin continues, according to these medical authors, men have more hair because they have more semen, and their hotter bodies froth this semen more readily throughout their whole bodies. Again, another quote from Hippocrates. That's our sixth one. The nature, and the Greek word there is phusis. Again, this is a word that occurs in the New Testament, in this passage that we're talking about and others. Martin says, the nature, phusis, of men is to release or eject the semen. During intercourse, semen has to fill all the hollow hairs of the female body on its way from the male brain to the genital area, again, through the man, and then goes to be ejected into the women where it's absorbed, again, by the hair. Thus, therefore, men have hair growth on their face, chest, and stomach. A man with hair on his back reverses the usual position of intercourse. And this is, again, from Hippocrates and Aristotle. A man with long hair retains much or all of his semen. Now catch that, because this is going to harken back to the whole men shouldn't have long hair. Martin says, a man with long hair retains much or all of his semen, and his long, hollow hair draws the semen toward his head area, but away from his genital area where it belongs, where it should be ejected, because that's what men are supposed to do. That's how we have babies. Therefore, Martin, continuing, says, 1 Corinthians 11:14 correctly states that it is a shame for a man to have long hair, since the male nature, phusis, is to eject rather than to retain semen. In contrast, the nature, phusis, of women is to draw up the semen and congeal it into a fetus. That's another quote from Hippocrates. We all know this name, Hippocrates. This is the father of medicine. This is why doctors take the Hippocratic Oath. This is what Hippocrates believed. All this stuff. Martin, back to him again, he says, a woman's body, again quoting Hippocrates, is simply one huge gland, and the function of glands is to absorb. So, again, I know this sounds, again, like crazy talk, and it is from a modern scientific perspective. It's just sort of absurd and ridiculous. But this is what they're believing about what goes on inside both the male and the female body, and it's connected with hair. Another paragraph. Now, Hippocrates again also writes that glands and hair fulfill similar bodily functions. Just as glands absorb the excess bodily fluid that flows to them, so also hair collects the excess froth fluid that rises to the surface. What glands do within the body, catch this, what glands do within the body, hair does on the surface of the body. As one large gland designed to absorb male reproductive fluid, a woman's body is assisted by long, hollow hair that increases the suction power of her hollow uterus. Now that's a quote from Aristotle. Remember Aristotle? Again, he wasn't a moron. Okay, this is Aristotle. Again, to us it sounds totally absurd, and scientifically it is, but this is what they're thinking back in the first century and, of course, earlier, a little bit earlier. So, back to Martin, consequently, another author, Pseudo Phocylides, appropriately states, long hair is not fit for males, but for voluptuous women. End quote. And he says it again because of this belief about the function of hair when it comes to reproduction. Now, Martin, and this is going to be toward the bottom of page 79, Martin writes, this conception of hair is part of the female genitalia. Explains the favorite Hippocratic test for sterility in women. So Hippocrates had a way to test if women were sterile, if they couldn't have babies. Again, the suspicion is that there's something wrong with the woman. So Hippocrates had a test for telling if the reason a woman patient came to him, the reason that she couldn't have kids is if she was sterile or not. So here's his test. A doctor places a scented suppository in a woman's uterus and then examines her mouth the next day to see if he can smell the scent of the suppository. If he smells the scent, he diagnoses her as fertile. If he does not smell the scent, he concludes she is sterile.
Now, I am going to stop here because you can tell now how strange it is. Now, this is up to date scientific, whatever they call scientific, medical information that people had to live with during Paul's time. Now, we understand Paul must have had information like that. I mean, he was very educated, and so he had quite a lot of information about the Greeks' accomplishments. And so we know that he probably believed the same thing. Matter of fact, Paul built this statement on nature. And again, the people in Corinth, they were mainly a uh, Greek audience, Greek members. There were maybe some few Jews, but Jews that lived in a Greek country, in a Greek culture, that must have been aware of the same thing. So I want to stop with it because it kind of gives you an idea. And if you want to listen to the whole thing, of course, go and listen to the whole thing. I think it's 45 minutes, and I just don't have time, to have this whole thing on my video here. But you can do it yourself. So, but it gives you some kind of idea that hair was involved in the sexual process in creating, children. And so therefore, it was not appropriate for men to have long hair, but it was totally appropriate for women. Now, at the end, he makes a statement, and I can explain that to you also. That's not so complicated. But at the end, he said women also should put a head covering on their head because of the angels. Now, when he says that, it has something to do with the fallen angels. The fallen angels who, before the flood, had relations with earthly women and created kind of monsters or hybrids. We can use it hybrids today because that's a good scientific word. So hybrids, a combination of human and angels, and they created really monsters, the Nephilims, and the Nephilims became very violent. They were giants and were, was some cause for what they said the flood, that God decided to destroy humankind. Humankind was destroyed because humankind was so evil, but not just evil, but humankind was mixed with the DNA was totally affected by intermarrying with these fallen angels. And so the DNA was totally corrupt. So they were not just evil, but the DNA was corrupt. And the only DNA that was not corrupt was Noah and his 3 sons. And I am not so 100% sure about, let's see, which descendants were those? Ham's descendants. There were three: Japheth, Ham, and um, what was the third guy? Enoch, not Enoch. Um, Shem. Okay, it was Shem. I'm thinking, who is that third guy? Shem. And Shem was, of course, the line where Abram came out of. So, anyways, but Ham, uh, I am not sure about Ham because Ham's descendants, I think Ham was the one that had a son named Canaan, and Canaan then had Nimrod. And we know that Nimrod was responsible for the building of Babel, the Tower to Babel. And so Nimrod again was pretty corrupt. And so, anyways, it was because of that. So he is also saying at the end that because of the angels, women should have head covering. In other words, it's hiding women from the angels. So when the angels, fallen angels, look down upon us, and they were looking for probably the prettiest and women. And so when a woman has the head covering, they're not as likely to be seen by the angels. Okay, he didn't go into detail on that one, but he did allude to that, and that makes sense. I always thought about that. I always kind of realized that the reason why Paul didn't believe that women should have head covering is because of the fallen angels. Now, I guess we don't have, I don't know, maybe in Paul's times they thought it was a greater risk that, women would be maybe victims to fallen angels. I don't know. So we don't know, but it's interesting to realize that whatever Paul advised these Greek Christians, that he was building on their understanding of culture, their understanding of medical procedures. So again, showing very clearly that Paul was influenced by his culture and by his education. And so he was using, it's not like, okay, he wakes up someday and wrote down the letter to the Corinthians. It's not the way that he wrote down the letter to Corinthians because of his thinking. He thought about this information. And also, he wrote to the Corinthians so they would understand what he is saying. So anyways, I thought it was interesting. You have a chance to listen to this whole information about First Corinthians that Dr. Michael Heiser did. And so go back and listen to the whole thing if you're interested in it. For me, it was important to just really show that we need to know about the background. We cannot just close our eyes and say, well, this is what Paul said. He was inspired by God, and therefore it's God's word, and so therefore it's a commandment of God, and we're going to have to follow it for the rest of our lives, not considering that it was maybe a cultural thing. So, anyways, continue to study. Listen to Dr. Michael Heiser because he has a lot more interesting things to say about I'm amazed about his information. So until next time, keep studying.